What's up, fantasy managers? I want to talk about the big boys because they should eat their cake too. The offensive line are important for your fantasy players to score points. I have information that you should know. I know you're interested, so stick around for 7 seconds. Now, this information can help you decide your own fantasy tiebreakers of who to start or who to sit. By understanding who has the advantage in the trenches, it can help you get a leg up on your opponents for this week. I have 3 players that you want to target. I have 3 players you want to avoid. All this information is on PFF. I subscribe to it, so you don't have to. I'm going to relay this to you, and here's the notes right now. Now, the offensive line that you want to target is the Panthers versus the Commanders. This offensive line, this matchup is actually going to come up a few more times in this episode. The Carolina Panthers offensive line owns a 78.2 pass blocking grade this season. That's a top 5 mark in the league. As a result, Carolina's offensive line has allowed just a 16.4% pressure rate. That is the best in the league. Very surprising, I know, but it is true. Washington's defensive line has managed just a 60.3 pass rush grade this season, which ranks 25th on the year. Adding to the Commanders' woes in the trenches, they will likely be without Dorrance Armstrong, the highest graded defensive lineman on the team, both overall and in pass rush grade. They will also be without Jonathan Allen, who is 3rd among their defensive line in pass rush grade this season. So what this is telling me here is that the Commanders' pass rate is already bad, and Carolina's offensive line pressure rate is the best. So there's going to be no pressure on Andy Dalton. So his benefit, obviously it benefits Andy Dalton. In a clean pocket completion percentage, he's ranked 18th, so he's a top 20 quarterback when there's a clean pocket. And then also with a clean pocket, his accuracy rating is top 10. It's 8th overall. This can also benefit Xavier Legette. The rookie can get more opportunities, more targets coming up from this game. But the number one person that this benefits the most on the team is Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson has been the Panthers' clear target leader this season. And a big part of that has been when his quarterback has been kept clean. On non-pressure dropbacks, Johnson has earned a 31.4% target rate, the 8th highest mark among wide receivers. When comparing to pressure dropbacks, Johnson still sees the ball with a respectable 17.9% target rate, but that ranks 19th at position. So it's a huge jump from 8th overall on non-pressure dropbacks to 19th overall in pressure dropbacks, but still top 20, top 10. Johnson is also significantly more effective on those non-pressure dropbacks, earning a 2.27 yards per route run. That's 23rd, compared to just 0.39 yards per route run, which ranks 81st among qualifying wide receivers on pressure dropbacks. So still, there's a huge gap from when his quarterbacks are being pressured and when his quarterbacks are not being pressured. Johnson's fantasy finishes have been up and down so far this season, with 3 finishes inside the top 13 and 3 finishes outside the top 55. But fantasy managers should expect something closer to the former this week. This is expected to be a good matchup for Diontae Johnson. Even the cornerback that's facing him on the Redskins allows 0.36 fantasy points per route run. That's great for wide receivers. And then you're telling me when Andy Dalton doesn't get pressured, he targets the shit out of Diontae Johnson, and the Redskins are going to be diminished at the defensive line, and they're not going to pressure Andy Dalton at all. I think we'll see a good game out of Diontae Johnson. So the next offensive line that we want to try to target is Detroit Lions versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Lions offensive line has earned a 76.2 pass blocking grade. That is the 6th best mark this season, allowing just a 23.5% pressure rate. That's 13th overall. The Vikings defensive line has managed just a 56.4 pass rush grade, which ranks 27th overall, while its 28.8% pressure rate is below average mark. So the Lions offensive line is amazing. They're elite status, and the Vikings defensive line, it's telling me right now, it's just average. So the advantage here when it comes to pass blocking goes to the Detroit Lions. And the player to target who will light up your team is quarterback Jared Goff. Goff has thrown 7 touchdown passes when kept clean this season, tied for 6th most in the league. Goff has thrown 4 big-time throws when kept clean, and big-time throws are a pass that is both highly difficult and valuable. These passes are typically thrown further down the field and or into a tighter window and have an excellent ball location and timing. It's a type of a grading scale, but it means it's great. which also allows him to utilize high-end speed threat Jameson Williams more often. I have Jameson Williams. I've been seeing this happen all season long. So what we see here, when defenders get in his face, he's definitely not as good as when he has a clean pocket. There's a huge difference between 7 touchdowns in a clean pocket to 1 touchdown when getting blitz. Goff's fantasy production has been trending in the right direction lately after a quieter start to the season, managing 2 top 10 finishes in the last 2 games after finishing no better than quarterback 19 in his first 3 games. Goff has earned the 7th best passing grade, 77.5, over his last 3 games, improving from quarterback 30, which was 43.2, in that regard in the first 2 games. A big part of this success has come from the ability to take advantage of favorable matchups against the Cardinals' poor pass rush in Week 3, Seattle without its top 2 pass rushers, and the Dallas Cowboys without Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence in Week 6. And if you watched this video last week, we went over that and we kind of expected that outcome. Now, we should expect the Lions' offensive line to help Goff maintain his level of success in Week 7. So expect Jared Goff to light up your team. And the third offensive line that we want to target is the Kansas City Chiefs against the San Francisco 49ers, the Super Bowl matchup. The Chiefs' offensive line owns a 71.5 run blocking grade. That's the 7th best mark this season, while the 49ers' defensive line strength lies in their pass rush ability that hasn't carried over to the run defense. San Francisco's defensive line ranks 24th in run defense grade at 55.1 after allowing 1.6 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That is 7th worst marked in the league. And the player that we want to target from the Kansas City Chiefs who will light up your team is Kareem Hunt. Even though he doesn't have a lot of stats for this season, I believe it's only his 3rd game back, he is expected to be putting up enough production this week to really help your team. We've only got a small sample's worth of snaps from Hunt in 2024, but it was promising enough that fantasy managers should feel good about starting him as he's coming off a PPR running back 6 performance in Week 5. Hunt carried the ball 26 times for 103 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown when we last saw him, averaging 3.8 yards per carry, though that number jumps to 5.1 when given at least 1 yard before contact. Should the Chiefs lean on him again this week, Hunt's matchup and advantage in the trenches should help him overcome some of his downfalls as a no longer elite option out of the backfield, which can still help carry his fantasy value in Week 7. What this is saying, even though his average yards per carry is 3.8, that's not the greatest, on those runs that he gets at least 1 yard before contact, he then jumps up to 5.1 yards per carry. This is basically he gets that 1 yard, and when he gets tackled, he's falling forward. And that's what you want. You want this guy to fall forward, not backwards, because he's getting you more points, more yards. Yo, if you made it this far, and if you're enjoying the information that I'm providing you about the offensive line matchup report for Week 7, if you could please hit the subscribe, press the like. It goes a long way. We got a goal trying to get to at least 1,500 by the end of this football season. We can't do it without you. We appreciate all you guys, everything and all. It goes a long way. Thank you. All right, let's do a 180, and let's check out the offensive line that you want to avoid. Let's look at the key players that you want to ice out from your team. And the first matchup that we want to avoid, the offensive line that we want to avoid, Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets. The Steelers' offensive line has managed a 60.9 pass blocking grade, which ranks 24th this season, while allowing a 9.7% knockdown rate. That is sacks plus quarterback hits, which is 8th worst in the league. The Jets' defensive line has generated the 6th highest pressure rate in the league, 39.6%, and the 5th highest quick pressure rate, 2.5 seconds or less rate, and that is 27.9%. So the defensive line for the Jets, they're getting to the quarterback, and they're getting to the quarterback fast, and the Steelers are allowing a lot. So who does this impact? Well, it impacts the quarterback, whoever it may be, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, it don't matter, even though I think it's Russell Wilson, so it impacts him. And the wide receivers, because how is Wilson going to be able to have a 300-yard pass a game, 4 touchdowns, if he's rushing out of the pocket or getting hit all the time or getting sacked? But the number one player to try to avoid, to ice out of your lineups, is the tight end, Pat Freiermuth. And this sucks, because this is my guy for this week. This is my tight end. And you're telling me that I shouldn't even be starting this guy. Freiermuth is currently sitting as a PPR tight end 8 for the year, thanks to 5 of his 6 games resulting in top 15 finishes at his position, which includes a tight end 2 performance in week 5. However, areas for concern with Freiermuth include his target rate on pressure dropbacks. Freiermuth goes from being the second most targeted receiving option on the team from a clean pocket at 18.9% to the 4th option when there is pressure on the play at 11.9%, which could continue with a change at quarterback. Russell Wilson historically invites pressure more than the average quarterback, and that isn't likely to change behind this offensive line. So you're telling me when it's a clean pocket, he is the most targeted person on the team, but when there's pressure, he becomes the 4th option on the team. And the Jets, they pressure the 4th most, and they're the quickest to get to the quarterback. Yeah, so from this data here, it looks like Pat Freiermuth needs to be iced out of your fantasy lineup, and he needs to be iced out of my fantasy lineup too as well. I'm going to go to the market, and I'm going to buy me another tight end. And the second offensive line that we want to avoid is the Patriots versus Jacksonville Jaguars, Duval County. And this game's being played in London. The Patriots offensive line ranks 29th in pass blocking grade of 49.2 this season, allowing a league high 43% pressure rate. That's insane. The Jaguars defensive line hasn't been exceptional on the year, ranking around an average in pass rush grade of 64.2 for the year, though it still holds an advantage in the trenches versus New England. So, just about half of the dropbacks that the quarterback does for the Patriots, he is getting pressured in the face, and now they have a rookie quarterback back there. Interesting. But maybe you can still play Drake May because this secondary is pretty bad, and Tyler has mentioned that quarterbacks that actually go against the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of end up being the quarterback one on the week. I don't know if Drake May is going to do that, but maybe he can have some success. But I do know the player that you want to try to avoid and ice out of your fantasy lineups is DeMario Douglas. And when I was reading this on PFF, I was kind of wondering that this might be a reach for them just because we saw last week in London that the Bears defeated the Jacksonville Jaguars in the middle of the field with Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet, and that's kind of the same area that DeMario Douglas will play at. Well, coming off his best game of the season where he finished as the PPR wide receiver 8 with a new quarterback, there may be some temptation to start Douglas this week and chase the points. However, there is at least some concern that Douglas may not be the top target if Drake May is under pressure at a high rate again. On pressure dropbacks this season, Douglas ranks just 4th on the team with a 9.6% target rate, while on non-pressure dropbacks, he owns a 27.6% target rate, which leads his team in wide receivers and tight ends. This was the case in one game with May at quarterback as well, where Douglas earned a 44.4% target rate on non-pressure dropbacks, which led the team. If the Jaguars can create pressure at a high rate, specifically with their top edge rushers Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, working against backup offensive tackles, then Douglas may not have such success this week as he did last week. And the last offensive line that we want to avoid this week is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Baltimore Ravens. The Buccaneers offensive line ranks in the middle of the pack in terms of run blocking grade this season with a 64.8 and ranks 25th in generating rushing yards before contact per attempt at 1.1. The Ravens defensive line has just allowed 0.8 rushing yards per attempt before contact, which is tied for the best mark in the league. And its 84.8 run defense grade is also the best mark in the league. You don't run against the Ravens, you have to pass it. The Ravens defensive line is just too damn good against the run. And which player does this impact? Well, it can impact Bucky Irvings, who is 7th overall for running backs in yards per touch, 7th in juke rate, 4th in breakaway runs. Or what about Sean Tucker, who had 14 attempts for 136 yards and 1 touchdown, with 3 receptions for 56 yards and another touchdown. He had 34 points last week. He was running back 1 on the week, but I'm not talking about him either. I'm talking about Rachaad White. We saw what Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker did without Rachaad White. The Buccaneers team rushed for over 277 yards without Rachaad White, and that is the 3rd highest in Buccaneers team history. And White, again, he's basically just surviving this year off of volume because his running metrics they're not great. His yards per touch is 38th. His juke rate, 20th. His breakaway runs, 25th. He's all about receptions and goal line opportunities. That's really all it is. Now he's going to be back going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Do you feel like you have to start him? Let's talk about it. White could be returning from injury this week, and he'll be returning to a lighter workload out of the backfield, considering Bucky Irving and potentially even Sean Tucker may have earned themselves larger roles after destroying that Saints defense in White's absence. The other issue stems from the disadvantages in the trenches, which White has not dealt with too well this season. When contact 2 yards or fewer from the line of scrimmage, White is averaging just 2.1 yards per carry, which ranks 45th among 56 qualifying running backs. And under the same circumstances, White ranks 42nd in first down touchdown rate at 11.1%, 36th in rushing grade, 55.9, and owns the second worst stuff run rate at 42.2%. Stuff run rate is how many times you are tackled behind the line of scrimmage. White can be safely avoided this week if he is active. You want to ice this guy out of your lineup and not play him this week against the Baltimore Ravens. All right, so these are my quick hits. These are the games that you want to have a fantasy player playing in. And of course, the main one where there's going to be probably, I think, the most points scored this week is Carolina and Washington. Just from the Carolina's offensive line to the Washington's defensive line, Carolina has a 35% advantage in the passing game, and that is actually the highest of the week. And they also have an advantage here of 32% in the running game. You know, Washington, these are just going to be two bad defenses going against each other who have star players on the offensive side of the ball. You got to play everybody that you can in this one. And look, because even the second one, it's reversed. So Washington's offensive line, they have a 33% advantage against Carolina's defensive line for passing, and in the running, 22%. So this is just a game you want to have a part in. You want to have some players in here. I have Jaden Daniels in this, so I'm looking forward to him scoring points. Me and Tyler actually have him ranked number 1 this week for quarterback rankings in week 7. So this is going to be another game that I expect Jaden Daniels and even Andy Dalton and other star players to actually really perform. Even Diontae Johnson, who we just talked about earlier. All right, the next game I want to talk about, Lions offensive line against the Vikings defensive line for the run game. And the Lions have a 49% advantage in this matchup in the Battle of the Trenches. And it's because the Lions offensive line, they're just bullies. They're one of the best lines, if not the best offensive line in the league. The Lions, they push their defenders back, right? 1.82 yards before contact when running the ball. But the Vikings only give up 1.03 yards before contact. So they're meeting them at the line of scrimmage. The 1.82 yards is just such a high number, and that's why it's saying it gives the advantage to the Lions. And also, when the Lions get inside the 5-yard line, you know, they just like to run the ball. They got 13 attempts inside the 5-yard line this year, which they converted into touchdowns 62% of the time. Where against the Vikings, you mainly have to give up running the ball because you fall so far behind that Sam Darnold-led team, and teams have only ran inside the 5-yard line twice. And they didn't convert on those touchdowns. I think it was the Jets that did that too. But anyway, so in this matchup, I really don't think there's going to be a lot of running. I think this is going to be mainly Sam Darnold against Jared Goff. But if you got running backs playing, I would prefer to do Jahmyr Gibbs over David Montgomery in this matchup. And the last game I want to talk about that you want to have somebody involved in is some San Francisco 49ers against the Chiefs. The San Francisco 49ers have a 37% advantage in the run game because their offensive line averages a 1.71 yards before contact when rushing the ball. And the Chiefs' defensive line averages 1.26. 1.71 is great. I can run through that. So you can't pass against the Kansas City Chiefs. Their secondary is that damn good, but you can run against them. And Jordan Mason gets a lot of volume, and he's been playing very well this year. I don't expect this to be a blowout. I expect it to be a close game where you can feel comfortable starting Jordan Mason in this matchup. That was the offensive line match report for week 7. We got the 3 players that you want to target. We got the 3 players that you want to avoid. Then we got additional games in there that you want maybe a little piece of, or you want to stay away completely. Last week's video compared to actually what happened, it was pretty dead on. I think there was only one person who I think, underperformed, but pretty much those stats were able to predict what was going to happen for week 6. It was pretty good. Yesterday, Tyler and I did our ranking video. Every Friday, we go live to answer questions. If you want to know where your player ranked, was a high, was a low, just click this right here, and you'll see. I'll talk to you in that episode. Deuces.